Hello, YouTube. So, continuing discussion forward of Luffy's new powers, as of chapter 1044, I think that we didn't really understand these powers. What I mean by that is, a lot of us are complaining about the fact that Luffy has awakened his Devil Fruit. It's been said it's the most ridiculous power in the world, not to confuse with the strongest power in the world, and he is free to do everything he wants to do as long as his imagination is above the roof. So a lot of us are considering that maybe, well, now Luffy could do literally anything. He could beat Kaido in like a moment, in a very short time, and he could take care of every single Yonko that exists. Like specifically speaking of Blackbeard, and he can literally take down the world government, which is not true. First of all, you have to realize that Luffy doesn't know his powers. He's saying he can fight a little longer. He feels different, he feels stronger, and he can go for another round. That doesn't necessarily mean that he knows about his powers. It can be seen that he's trying to do subconsciously, honestly speaking, he could do whatever he wants to do. He lifted out the ground, he reflected Kaido's borrow breath, and he can enlarge his arms. I think that's all instinct. I don't think Luffy realizes that he's awakened his Devil Fruit. He thinks he's at his peak, that is true, but that necessarily doesn't mean he understands his power completely. The Gorosei said he is bound by only his imagination. So Luffy doesn't know this, by the way. He doesn't know that his fruit is... He doesn't know his fruit is Hito Hito no Mi Moral Nika. He doesn't know that he's only limited by his imagination. And he doesn't really know how his powers work. He just knows that it's a new part of his Devil Fruit that he's awakened. It's the Gum Gum Fruit, and now he feels a little different, and he sort of understands the fruit in a way. We get to see more of this in chapter 1045 from what I have seen a little bit. But I haven't seen everything, of course, because the chapter isn't out yet. But we're going to see the fight between Luffy and Kaido. We could sort of understand from the fight that, yes, he can do a lot more than he used to do before. He's now he's not bound by his fruit anymore. He can do whatever he wants to do, considering the circumstances, and he could probably take down Kaido. But the assumption is wrong that he can actually take down Blackbeard or the world government at this point, because he has to know about his powers. He has to realize that the only thing that's holding him back right now is his imagination, and that, well, he doesn't have the restrictions he had with his Gear 4th. So, moving on from that point onward, it could be seen that Luffy hasn't reached his full potential yet. As we know, awakenings have drawbacks. Both Law and Kid are new to their awakenings. They said that their awakening take a lot of their powers and their stamina. The same could be said for Luffy. He just awakened his Devil Fruit, and just because he understands how to use it doesn't mean he has the stamina to keep it. It's the same for Gear 4th. The first time he used Gear 4th, he couldn't keep it for too long. I think the same could be said for the Awakening. It's his first fight with his Awakening. It's the first enemy he's facing off using his newborn powers. And I think there's more time needed for Luffy to basically come up with better ideas and, try to understand his powers a little better and sort of understand that he could actually do all of this, and he has more creativity and more freedom. So my point is, I think he needs more training. He's at his peak, all right. I don't think we're going to be getting any more power-ups from here unless Oda decides to. Logically speaking, if Oda were to set the expectation for Luffy being the Gomu Gomu Fruit, and Go means 5 and Gear 5, so I think it's going to remain to Gear 5. I don't think we're going to go any higher than this, and this is definitely his peak. If Oda says it's his peak, there will be no more power-ups, from his Devil Fruit at least. So, but that necessarily doesn't mean that he can't improve on it. He had Gear 4th. He came up with new forms when time went on. He faced more opponents, then he understood his powers better, and he came up with new forms time after time. And I think the same could be said for the Awakening. He's going to come up with new skill sets. He's going to come up with more interesting ways to use his Devil Fruit and to basically use it in the best way possible for him when when he's facing off against either Blackbeard or Imsama, any one of those characters. So I think we need to give him more time, and this is not Luffy's full potential. And if another thing I want to get on when it comes to his full potential, of his awakening, Oda specifically named the fruit Nika, which is sun god, means his powers have something to do with the sun. There's something going on in the community. There's been a ruckus in the community saying that the Blackbeard's fruit is not actually Logia fruit, it's a mythical zone, same like Luffy's, where he's the god of darkness. And I don't think this is wrong. It could be considered cliche or a bit, generic, but I think it makes sense. The way Blackbeard said to Ace that would it be the darkness or the sun, I think Oda was foreshadowing the fight between Luffy and Blackbeard. And Luffy with more control over his powers, with an awakened devil fruit, with more haki, with more advanced haki, and his powers being literally the sun. I think he's a good match against Blackbeard, and I think Blackbeard would actually sort of, would be going something towards the opposite direction of Luffy, which has always been the case. So I wouldn't be surprised, and I don't think the community should be surprised if Blackbeard, the Yami Yami no Mi, is actually another god fruit named after the darkness or something. I'm not exactly sure what it could be, but it could be light versus darkness, or the sun versus the darkness. It fits perfectly for the plot and sets up very well for the final fight, and I don't think the community should be surprised. Although I could be wrong again, because it's Oda. We've always been wrong. So moving on, I think the flames in his head when we see the awakening first, the flames in his head, I don't think that's just godlike powers. I think that's a part of the Sun God Nika. I think that is a power of Nika that Luffy hasn't awakened yet. He's been able to use Red Hawk, which justifies that he has flames coming out of his head. But I think there's more to the flame than we initially, think about it. We just say, alright, it's maybe for show. Maybe now he can use better Red Hawks or something. But I think fire is a very integral part of Luffy's. He inherits the will of Ace using the Mera Mera no Mi. And if Sabo by chance dies, that means Luffy gets to inherit both the Mera Mera no Mi, in both versions of the Mera Mera no Mi, and even some of Sabo's attacks maybe. I don't know. If Sabo dies. I don't think Sabo dies, but it's highly likely. Or unlikely. Not the point though. I think he definitely can use fire. He doesn't realize it yet. He definitely doesn't realize it. It's going to take some time, and I think he can use fire or even light. If we're strictly speaking of the sun, he can perhaps use fire-like powers. And I don't think the community should be surprised, since we've been talking about Luffy inheriting Ace's will ever since Marineford, how he's been able to use Red Hawk, although that was a very good explanation, using friction and rubber to create heat. I think now it's gonna be more of, it doesn't have to take Luffy all the thing he does with his friction and his rubber powers to create heat. Now I think he can actually generate heat from his body itself. I think that's a part of his power, and I think that will likely be the case. Furthermore, it's been said that Luffy can also turn into a giant, which I will not debate against, because I feel like Joy Boy was actually a giant. That explains the giant straw hat, the sword on Onigashima, and how Onigashima is actually the origination of the ancient kingdom, my bad. So it's been argued. I'm not saying it's foolproof, but we know there's something special about Wano, and I'm going to talk about that in a later video. But for now, I think that he can definitely turn into a giant if he wants to, sort of the same as Nightmare Luffy. I think it parallels Nightmare Luffy in some way, shape, or form, and I think he could definitely do that. And if we're moving on to Elbaf, for honest to God, if we do move into Elbaf after Wano, I think Luffy becoming a giant, allying with the giants to fight off against the world government, creating the ancient kingdom from 800 years ago, I think that might happen. And I don't think the community should be surprised up to that either, because Luffy being a giant has been hinted before, and giants are prevalent in the story. Although we do have Hajiruddin in the Grand Fleet, I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's enough to conclude that Luffy will ally with everyone and the giants are with him. I think Luffy turning into a giant has more of a significant role play than Luffy having alliance with the giants. So I think that will make his journey to Alba very easy, and it's going to be very interesting to see from here on out. As for more extension of his powers, does Luffy have Logia-like properties? That we haven't seen so far. What we've seen so far is that he could turn his body into a giant, sort of like Gear 3, but with less restrictions. He doesn't have to blow his arm anymore, and he could basically stretch any part of his arms, or any part of his body, for that matter, anytime he wants to without doing anything, external. And, well, and the other part we've seen is how he can turn the ground into rubber, which sort of replicates what Karakuri did. We haven't seen any properties of Logia thus far, but I don't think that we won't be seeing it. Because if it is a mythical zone, and if we see Marco, for example, he's got healing capabilities, he has fire Logia capabilities, I think Luffy will definitely have some sort of a Logia form. I don't know which. If we're strictly talking about Luffy's Logia, I think he can inherit that from Karakuri. He's facing off against Karakuri, he realizes his food is very similar to his, and now I think he'll try to replicate Karakuri's abilities, regardless of if he can or cannot do it. But I think that's a possibility, and we shouldn't just discard it immediately. As for the flames, another justification that everyone had was that Luffy having flames doesn't actually make sense. Because if we've seen the mythical zones, the Hirohitonomi model Buddha and the Hirohitonomi model Phoenix, which is Marco has flames because Phoenix have flames, but the Buddha didn't have flames. Yes, but strictly speaking, this is Sun God Nika. This is no mythology that exists in our world. It's something that Oda came up with, and if he wants to add fire to Nika's different abilities, he could do that. Maybe Nika did have the different abilities that we're talking about. And the community shouldn't be enraged by that. Luffy suddenly now has fire powers, which came out of nowhere. I think this has been foreshadowed through Ace, and it's a deity. It's a mythical form of the One Piece world. So we don't exactly know anything about Sun God Nika, but I think if he is the god of the sun, he should have fire powers, and we have no right to complain about it. I'm going to keep on saying what I did before. Have faith in Oda. Keep a little bit more patience. I think we're going to get through this very well. If you guys enjoyed the video and watched it until this far, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Feel free to let your thoughts down in the comments below. I want to read your comments whenever I can, and, well, I'd greatly appreciate it. It helps the algorithm. It helps me. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, peace.